Welcome to the Accidental Experts podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Hamilton. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a child and family therapist. I have been in practice for over 15 years, and I'm also a mom of 4. So I know the challenges both professionally and personally. I'm so glad that you're here today to grow your parenting toolbox. Please come as you are and be ready to learn. My goal is to make you the accidental expert so that you can raise healthy humans. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm so glad you're with us today. So we have Lisa Sheinhouse, and she is both a mom and a mental health expert. And she is going to be talking to us about how she has navigated the challenges of raising a kid with neurodivergence in her life and how she's gotten her to adulthood. So with that, I'm excited to introduce Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Okay. We're going to be talking about the real life experience of helping our kids, like parenting kids who are neurodivergent. And I think this is an important piece of like not losing ourselves, because I think even if you're not parenting neurodivergent kids, like it's hard to not just be mom. Not that that's a just, but like we kind of take on this role and then it's like we're responsible for everything this kid needs.
And when you have more than one,
Yes.
it's you a little bit lose yourself 100%.
Yes. Right. And that's hard. And it's like, I think something that I think about too is like, I don't want like, like I could go out with my girlfriends, but like, I also want to be with my kids and like be with them sometimes. And then sometimes I do want to go out with my girlfriends or, go on a date with my husband or whatever. But like, it's like, sometimes I'm like, oh, well, I don't want them to be here by themselves, or like changing that mindset is really hard to put our needs like above, right? To be like making sure we're filling our cup and like taking care of ourselves.
You always laugh at on the airplane when they say to you, oh, cover your own mouth with oxygen before you take care of somebody else. But at this point, my oldest is 26, and I really see that need to take care of yourself and be a human before you're a parent. Mm-hmm. Because if you're not taking care of yourself, you don't recognize the parent you're becoming, and it's not always pleasant. And if you want to be a good parent, especially for a neurodivergent child who has a much harder, like it's so much easier for her to get on your nerves or to need so much. Mm-hmm. If you don't take those few moments to yourself and give yourself some self-care, or even just, my favorite is a mommy timeout. Mm-hmm. When you need a moment and you need a moment, always a better thing to take care of yourself first. And then, Yes. And definitely in my parenting journey, I've had times where my daughter has had middle of major meltdown status, and I'll like tap out to like my mother and I'll say, hey, Ma, stay on the phone with her on FaceTime so that I know she's safe. But if I don't walk away now, it's just going to end badly for all of us. Mm-hmm. And you need that.
Yes. Yeah. And that's so hard. What do you think? I mean, this is good because this is along the lines of things that I was wondering and wanting to ask you is like these mindset shifts that parents can make when raising a neurodivergent kid, because they're just, I mean, I'm raising 3 of them. So far we have the youngest is to be determined. We'll see what his status is. But I think it's hard to think about taking care of your needs or like tapping out, like taking a break, like tapping another partner in potentially, or another support person in. Like what are some mindset shifts that we can make that can also help us with raising neurodivergent kids?
So I think it's important to realize that neurodivergent kids are, we use the term neurodivergent for kids with ADHD, autism, learning disabilities. Mine also happens to have an anxiety disorder on top of her ADHD. And the term is supposed to be something like, we're not trying to fix this child. We're just trying to understand that the way he or she thinks is different than the way a neurotypical person thinks. Yes. So the first thing we have to do as parents of neurodivergent children is understand they think differently than we do. Mm-hmm. And how if you're parenting a child that doesn't have any issues, they are on a different planet than your neurodivergent child. And my first was a typical child, and honestly, she was an angel. And then my second came, and even, she didn't get her diagnosis of ADHD until she was 14. But there were definitely hints along the way. And I have definitely been told more than once as a professional in the field, how did you not see this? How did you not see this? Mm-hmm. The mom guilt there is huge.
Yeah, but it's really actually hard. So I want to say to you that, like, as a therapist too, and mom, like, when my oldest had dyslexia, I kept saying there's something not right here. Like, I know there's something not right, and everybody was telling me, who were the the professionals seeing him, like, everything's fine, or this is normal, this is expected. And it wasn't. But, I was like trusting of that, of like other people, like the pediatrician, or the, whomever else, his teacher, like the person who was doing his like reading support at school would say, hey, there's something way bigger here. Right. And no one is acknowledging that. So I think it's harder when it's like you're normal, like right in front of your face. It's so much easier when you can have perspective and somebody else is noticing for you. So don't take that one too hard. I think that's
I
for other
still do.
professionals. Yes.
It's okay. I still do. I remember taking her to the doctor at about 18 months old because I needed a referral for early intervention here in New York. You need to see the doctor. And she wasn't speaking. And the doctor looked at me and said, oh, come on, you know better. And I was like, oh, I do, but she understands every single thing I'm saying. And she said, great. So she's following your 2-step directions. Wonderful. And your 5-step directions, but she's not speaking. So let's get her the help she needs. And I was never shy about getting her the help she needs, but the diagnosis, I can look back now and say, oh, I wish I would have done this when she was earlier. And, when she was younger. And a lot of my mind shift is give yourself a break, Lisa. It's okay. It doesn't matter when you figured out there was an issue and how you got her that help. It's that you did.
Yes.
And now
absolutely.
she's a strong, confident young lady who acknowledges every one of her, neurodivergent tendencies, and she's proud of them. And I think that's also incredibly important as a parent, making your child okay that they think differently and making sure that you don't look at it as a deficit and that he or she doesn't look at it as a deficit. For my daughter, she's very proud and she'll say straight up, I think differently than you do. As a very type A personality, that was a huge struggle as she was growing up. I'm that person who they give you an assignment and get it done within the first 3 hours of it being. She's that kid who'll be like, Ma, this was due 3 hours ago. And even when she's in college, when she was in college, and she would have those moments where like, Mommy, I'm supposed to submit an assignment. Or what should I do now? Or, and, I'm sure as a parent, we all have these moments of enabling our children and what should we do and how could we fix that? And no, that balance of, do we help them fix it? Do we help them? Do we just do it for them? And, weighing that and what makes most sense for each child.
But, it's hard. I mean, I think, it can be very hard to get the right diagnosis too, because sometimes people say, oh, this is totally normal, or they see it one way and that actually ends up not being their diagnosis. Like maybe we get a misdiagnosis. I don't find that in my practice that happens all that often, but occasionally that does. But I think, giving yourself grace of like, you're doing the best you can. I've never met a parent that wasn't doing the best that they could. Now, sometimes their skills were not to the level that they needed to be, right? But they wanted to do well. They didn't want to they weren't like, I want to raise a kid who needs therapy for their whole lives, or is like, can't hold down a job, or, I mean, like nobody wants that, right? Yes. And so I think even though it might be complicated and tricky and hard, because I know that I am learning all the time, even with all of my skill set, raising my children, like they're continually challenging me. I'm like, I've never met this problem before, but like this one lives on this particular challenge is at my house. So I have to figure it out because I can't just like pass it to next week. I've got to like solve this today.
Me, interrupt you for a second. For me, it was like I had an aha moment once when I said to my mother, you know what? You didn't waste your graduate school tuition. I'm a much better psychologist than I am a mother. I was working with a family and their kid was having temper tantrums regularly. He was 12 years old, throwing himself on the floor. He happened to have Down syndrome, and there was a lot of intense needs that were going on in the house. And I said to the mom, you know what? When he's having a temper tantrum, I need you to just stand at the door, make sure there's safety, but don't respond. And she looked at me and went, okay, is that what you do at your house? And I said, you know what? Starting tonight, I am. I had maybe a 10, 11-year-old, and I came home that night after a long day of work and had been working with this young man. So I got him about 8, 9 o'clock at night, and there was a serious temper tantrum. And I walked to the door of my daughter's bedroom and I said, here's where you're going to be. And I closed the door, and she was probably trashing the place, but it was her room, her safe space, and no one else was getting hurt. And my husband kept saying to me, are you sure this is okay? Are you sure this is okay? I said, yes. She's 11 years old. This behavior isn't typical, and we have to acknowledge that it isn't. And I'm not going to say it was like that, but we definitely maintained safety. We made sure she was safe, and those temper tantrums really did stop. And as a professional, I knew what to do. I just wasn't doing it at home the right way. And I took that moment to say, okay, I have to do better as a parent. And I did. And I was, it was a good moment for us. Took a couple of weeks, but we understood that as long as she was safe, it didn't matter if the pillowcases went out off her bed, or the stuffed animals went flying across the room. There was nothing in there that was dangerous.
Yeah.
And she wasn't hurting her sisters, and she wasn't hurting herself. And that was more important.
Yeah. Yes, safety is so important. So, I mean, speaking of that, like when our children are neurodivergent, a lot of times there is emotional intensity, there is impulsivity, or sometimes they can be constantly moving, right? Like doing things, and we can get, as parents, kind of like frustrated or bothered by that. Like, just like, stop. Like, I just want you to like sit still or whatever. Like, can you just calm down? So what tips or tricks do you have for those moments?
I think the first thing in those moments is to realize that their brain is different than ours. And whatever is going on in their brain at that moment, it might look like dysregulation to you, but they might need to be moving. They might need to be touching things. They might need, if it's a kid with autism, some stereotypical behaviors. Their body is craving that. So A, telling them to stop it is useless, but B, trying to control it isn't fair to them. It's what's helping them regulate themselves. So sometimes you have to look at it and say, is this worth the battle? Does it matter that they're like unpacking every single Lego and then putting it back and then unpacking it again? Does it matter that I asked her to clean her room and she did half her closet? For me, it's, in hindsight, I can easily say, is this worth the battle? And a lot of the times it really isn't. And we sometimes try to put our stuff on our children, and we shouldn't. And, one of the things right now, my adult daughter, she lives in the basement. That's, it's a nice little space down there. And I'll walk in there sometimes and say, oh, you have so much space. Why is your room such a mess? And then I'll say, you know what? It's not my stuff. I don't care. We can close a door. No one really goes down to the basement. And who really cares? Is this worth it for her to be so upset that we're about to have a fight over her laundry or her room being a mess? And it usually isn't. And when your kid is having one of those moments, how much you feed into it is so important. So it goes back to take a deep breath. And do I really want to feed into this right now? And how important is it for me to stop it? Now, if it's a safety thing, okay. But if it's not, and it doesn't really matter, it's okay to say, I'm over this. And I know that, like I could say, my time as a parent for a younger kid, it wasn't always so simple. And it's not always so simple. Is it irritating another one of her siblings? Is it irritating somebody else? But sometimes we can just move out of the way. And we probably should.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard because I'm thinking about one of my daughters, and she likes to sit upside down on the couch, but my husband really wants her to like sit on her bottom, like, or lay down, right? Like not be upside down. And it's, it's hard for me as like, I'm like, it's not hurting anything. It doesn't really matter to me all that much. Right. And so we had a conversation the other day about like, why does this really matter? Like, what is it? Like, what are you afraid will happen? Or like, what's the fear? Because like, it's not like in school she's sitting upside down. So like she's respectful to the rules there. But like do we need a rule about that? And so it was an interesting conversation around
what sensory thing is she getting out of it?
Yes.
And she must be. So there's probably two different things. Either she's getting something out of it, or she's getting the rise out of your husband with it, which is fun too. So either way, ignoring it, what's the harm in it? Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what we decided. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yes.
My husband and I used to have a lot of these conversations where I would sometimes I would have to pull that professional card out of the,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
because it was like, we're both her parents, like, why? And, you know, I think it also comes from a little bit both of our different upbringings,
Sure.
but I would say, like, why does this matter? And the only time it really mattered is if one of her sisters would get really bothered by it.
Mhm.
Then it was something, okay, we need to maybe get involved. And even though they're 20 and 23 now still living here, sometimes I still have to do that. But, you know, but even like I would say, just a great story about that. When my daughter, when she was in high school, she hated going to school. School was miserable for her. She didn't want to get out of bed. And she had just started ADHD meds and she needed to eat before her meds.
Mhm.
And every morning was a battle. Can we get her out of bed, get her dressed, get her downstairs? And one day, my older daughter, who was 17 at the time, said, Ma, why does this matter? Can't we just give her something to eat in bed, wait the half hour, give her the meds, and wait the half hour, and then have her get up and get dressed? Because every morning I was fighting. The other two weren't getting the attention they needed. Okay, not that the 17 needed much, but her little sister needed something.
Yeah.
And no one was getting what they needed in the house. And everyone would get out that front door with a level of tension that was
Mhm.
just through the roof.
Mhm.
And and it was my 17 who said, Ma, stop. Let's just take a moment. Does it matter if she eats her breakfast in bed, takes her meds, and then gets up? Or if she does it the way we've always been doing it? And, you know, I had many people tell me I was enabling her.
Mhm.
And I looked at them and I said, you know what? I'm not enabling her. I'm putting peace in my home. And
Mhm.
this is so much easier for everyone involved just to get out of bed at 7 o'clock every morning to get to school on time. At 6:30, I need to be having a battle? No.
No.
And
Yeah.
the peace, you know what? We did it and it worked. And I will not do it on vacation. And I will certainly won't do it now that she's an adult. But for school time, just it just brought such a level of peace everywhere in my
Mhm.
home that I don't care if you think I'm an enabler. This worked for me as a parent. And every professional who looked at me, her psychologist, her psychiatrist at the time, were like, come on, why are you doing this? I said, I'm doing it because we need peace in the morning. And it's not
Mhm.
just her. There are other
Mhm.
people involved too.
Mhm.
And you know what? That's also I think a tip that parents should realize. Sometimes things work for you that a professional may tell you isn't the best, but
Mhm.
it works for you and it works for your home. So do it
Mhm.
because there's no harm in it, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are things that maybe we as professionals don't understand why there's so much value, right? Or why that's working for that particular family. And I think sometimes I'll offer a different idea, like, hey, like you don't like this, or this isn't working very well for you. Like, can we try this? And then it's like, actually, the old way worked way better. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, I don't have to do it. Like, it's not me personally, right? So, like, if that's something that you're okay with,
Right.
like, everybody has to be okay with it.
Exactly. And
Mhm.
sometimes, like, you know, we had professionals in school tell me, oh, you can't do this, oh, you can't do that. And I would say, you know what? You wrote a behavior plan for my child that doesn't work for our family. Just
Mhm.
to give you an example, there was a psychologist who wrote a behavior plan for her that if she would get a zero anytime she did. I don't even remember what the behavior was. But the minute she got a zero, she lost all her points for the day. So if she got it
Mm.
at 8 o'clock in the morning, she was done for the day, right?
Yep.
Come
Mhm.
on. As we all
Yep.
know, that doesn't work.
Yep.
And then my favorite part of it was that her punishment was that I take away her cell phone. And I said, You might be the professional here. And I am a mommy, but I am also a professional. And everything I have learned in school tells me that what you're saying doesn't work. The behavior happens in school, the consequence happens in school, and it should be a natural consequence to what was done. Her
Mhm.
waiting 8 hours to come home and then me take away her cell phone, not only does she not learn anything, but it's going to damage my relationship with her.
Mhm.
And they were back and forth with me because they insisted I use this specific person. I said, you know what? I'm going to write her behavior plan myself.
Mhm.
I will give it to the psychologist that I'm working with, and let her say it's okay or what I should change. Because I know I am a little too involved. I'm her parent. And at the end of the day, mine worked
Mm.
because I used my professional knowledge, but also my parenting knowledge. And
Yeah.
I know, they always say a behavior plan doesn't work if your reward is something a kid doesn't like, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, you can reward a child. And again, our neurotypical kids do so much better with reward than taking something away.
Mm-hmm.
She earned something. She did so much better. When
Mm-hmm.
we were taking away her phone 8 hours later, it didn't work for her.
Yeah.
And so you have to find that thing that works. Also, not, listen, I am a professional and I do believe in us, but we're as parents, and I think this is important. All parents should know that you are your expert on your own child.
Mm-hmm.
No
Yes.
one can ever tell you don't know your kid.
Mm-hmm.
Know what works. And someone's writing a plan or telling you how to do something, make sure it works for you and your child.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, that's great advice, because I think that's something that I always say to parents often is like, your child best. Like, I'm an expert, but that doesn't mean I know your child better than you. Like, no one will ever know your child better than you. And so I trust mom gut, right? Dad gut. Like, if a parent feels something, I'm like, let's talk to me about that. Like, I'm going to listen, because I trust that very, very much. I mean, I think so many times parents have been right about something, or they say something and I'm like, okay, wait, tell me more about, okay, yes. I just didn't have the whole information, or like, you're right, that is not expected, or like, that is, a concern, or that is the right path to go down, or whatever it is. I think we all want what's best, but sometimes we think what we know is best, right? Like, I think as professionals, we'll sometimes give advice, and I've definitely had people give advice where they couldn't use their own advice on their own kids, right? Like, where it's like, well, don't give it to my kid if you couldn't do that at your own house. Like, if that's not the consequence you would have, let's not do that. But I do agree with you.
Do at work, when I'm working with whether it's, a lot of people I work with are adults, but still they might have mental health challenges or developmental disabilities. Mm-hmm. And so I'll say to a family member, would this work for you? Is this something how you would want to be treated? Or, and I give advice that has worked for me as a parent more than as a professional, because sometimes it's not just being about being a professional. You bring your parenting skills into being a professional,
sure.
And vice versa. Mm-hmm. It's important to be able to learn from both ends. It's
sure.
Who you are as a human,
Yes. Yeah. Growth for sure. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think when I started in my therapy career, I assigned a lot more quote unquote homework. Like, I would give more tasks to do. And then I was like, oh, wait, hold on. Like, when I became a parent, I'm like, we don't have any time. Like, we have such limited time. Like, let's use this very wisely. So if I'm going to give something to practice at home, it's going to be short and sweet and easy to do. Exactly. And that makes it so much more successful than it being like a whole thing. But I just didn't, I knew the clinical part, but I didn't know the parenting part yet.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to marry them, because if you don't, I don't think you're a good parent, and I don't think you're a good, professional. You really, and I've seen it for myself, that really I've been able to merge them together to just be both, to be better both.
Yes, for sure. It definitely helps. Okay. So how do parents support their kids and themselves, protecting their own mental health? Because I think there are times where, my 3-year-old, who is not neurodivergent that we know of, but he'll be like, I don't love you anymore. Or our kids can say and do hurtful things too, right? So how do we protect our own mental health while still supporting our kid on those especially really hard days?
So I think the first thing, that's important is to say, it's okay if I'm not okay in this moment. Mm-hmm. And it's okay. There are days I don't like my child very much. Mm-hmm. And it's okay to say that in your head. Mm-hmm. And maybe to your spouse or your own support system, never to your child. But sometimes it's okay to say, oh, I really don't like this behavior right now. Mm-hmm. And for my own mental health, I read a parenting blog on psychology today, and one of my most recent one was really about Jelly Roll. And I don't know if you've heard his song, but it's called I Am Not Okay. It's a great song. I remember hearing it and bursting into tears, because he validated what I think so many of us, there are days we're just not okay. And I think the first thing is to acknowledge that this day was hard. And I'll go back to self-care. If you don't take care of yourself, whether it's hanging out with your friends, taking a shower, sometimes literally my self-care is taking a 15-minute shower and just walking away from whatever chaos, as long as everything is safe. Mm-hmm. And you need to be able to say, okay, sometimes, and there are moments you have to put your own stuff to the side to focus on your child and your child's mental health. And I remember I have a friend who called me from the psych unit with her daughter who was about to commit suicide at 16 years old. And she was holding on by a thread with her kid. And there was a moment where they took her child in for an assessment, and she called me and she was hysterical. And I talked her through it and I calmed her down and we talked to what she was feeling at that moment. And then she said, okay, I'm okay enough to go back into there right now. And so you might take mini breaks of being okay enough, and you might take a few hours later when the kids are asleep. But it is so important to stay in tune with your emotions, because if you do not, you end up not parenting very well. And I'm sure we've all had moments where we've, as a parent, have not been proud of our responses. And I can look back now and say, you know what, when my daughter was 14, 15 years old, we were having quite a large argument, and she was escalating and I was escalating and she was escalating and I was escalating. And she ran outside of the house, and it was the middle of winter here in New York City without shoes and socks on. And I was freaking out. And I said to my husband, okay, you go out, go get her. I need to calm down, because I know we're just going to keep pushing each other's buttons. And we definitely at 14, 15, because the neurodivergence and the regular teenage hormones were all playing out. And I needed to say, I'm not okay here right now. So tag someone else in. And in that moment, it was my husband. He got her, brought her back inside the house. She said, Mommy, I'm not ready to talk to you. I said, that's okay, sweetie. I'm not ready to talk to you. Let's take 10 minutes and then we will regroup. And sometimes you can verbalize that to your child in the middle of something.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to be able to say, Mommy doesn't want to react right now. And that's something I've really started doing. That was my wake-up call in that moment, to say, I cannot always respond. And there have been times, and she has watched me do this, my other kids have watched me do this, I will count to 10 right there in that moment. And they're like, Mom, what are you doing? I'm like, Mommy needs to count to 10. So Mommy calms down before Mommy responds. And I think I taught my kids some valuable lessons in that, because I see them doing it.
Yes. They're looking at us too. Yes. To model that.
And I see them going, okay, hold on before I respond. And it's really important to be able to model good behavior rather than bad behavior. So, I think it's just so important to, take your own calming moments, tag out when you need to. Sometimes, and there were times where we were both kind of losing it, and I just hugged her. I just held her and hugged her, got her back to regulation. It got me calm, and it worked. And I will tell you, and I think because I can say this now as that she's an adult, she still meets with her psychiatrist regularly, not so much a psychologist anymore. She really doesn't need that in the same. And she actually said to a new psychologist recently, my mother and I when I was 16, I thought she was my worst enemy. And now she's my best friend.
Yeah.
And, that was a good validating moment as a mommy. I'm not going to lie. But it's also important. It's because we were able to not overreact in many situations as she was growing up.
Yeah. And do you feel like you needed help being aware of the times to not overreact? Like, is it a partner noticing it to you? Or were you able to notice it to yourself?
So I think in the beginning, it probably came from my kids. And I started watching their faces and seeing, seeing that, like, they saw my daughter, my other two, they saw my daughter having a meltdown, and they watched how I was going to respond to it. And I knew they were watching, and I knew she was watching. And there were definitely times, with my spouse, one of us will go, give us walk away. I got this, to either one of us. And sometimes, as my older daughter, who's a special ed teacher now, sometimes she would say, Ma, let me talk to her. Do you mind? It was great.
Yes.
Because, it really does take a village. And, part of it was, I think it was not so much when we were all alone. It was also when, we were around the larger family, my parents, my sister, her kids, and watching how everybody reacted to my daughter's impulsivity or her meltdowns or her responses that were not necessarily the best. And I definitely had to do a lot of education to the larger family on
Sure.
neurodivergence. And, I was just thinking about this, the anniversary of my father's death is coming up. And I was just thinking about my father was, one of those old school men, disciplinarian, and he could, in the beginning, he could not understand why I would say no and she'd be on the floor hysterical. He'd be like, that's just not what we do. What is that pain, And I had to really explain, Dad, she thinks differently. Daddy, she's not. And he wound up being her biggest advocate. When we needed to get her diagnosis, he's like, whatever you need, I'll pay for it. Those diagnoses cost a fortune.
Yes.
I will pay for that assessment. I will pay for those psychiatrist visits. And my father, who no one would ever have thought that he was going to be her biggest advocate, ended up being, if somebody in synagogue or on the street would watch her freak out, he'd be like, she's fine. Just give her a few minutes. And from a man who had 5 when she was having those like freakouts.
Yeah.
In it. So I think that is also important. You have to get yourself your village, and teach your village how to respond and what's right and what's wrong. And
yeah,
that helped me a ton.
Yes,
definitely.
Yeah, I think the village piece is important. I mean, because no one can do it alone. And I feel like when we think back to how things used to be hundreds of years ago, we weren't doing it on our own, right? We were in a community, and some communities still do that better than others, but like we didn't raise our kids in isolation. We didn't put them in our houses and then, that's where they did all their things and then, went to school and that's it. Like we were playing outside. We were helping with other people's kids. We job shared kind of, right? Like it was
parents and grandparents,
yes,
and aunts and uncles, and everybody was so involved. And, that's something that I knew I needed to draw on in my home. I worked full time. My parents were the ones who picked the kids up every day after school. My mom was the homework person, but my mom is a special ed teacher. So she really saved a lot of me.
Yes.
I did not do a lot of the homework. My mother did. And that to me was, one of the best helps that I could have as a parent, but it's also gave my child a safe space when she was irritated at me. Pick up the phone and go, hey, mommy's on my nerves,
Yeah.
And it gave her a support system.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes. Yeah. So what would you say are ways that, because I think when we think about neurodivergence, like, and even talking to our friends about it, sometimes, and you kind of spoke to this earlier, but like sometimes we can feel like it's a detriment. Like it can be frustrating. I have ADHD. So, that is annoying to me sometimes where it's like, why can't my brain just be like somebody else's who is able to execute something so easily? Like that is frustrating. For the most part, I feel like at this part in life, I have tools to manage that. But then sometimes my kids do things that I'm sure I used to do when I was younger that it's like, oh, that's so frustrating. So thinking about that piece, but then there's also gifts associated with the neurodivergence that are not just like frustrating. They're lovely and they're thinking outside the box and they're like so inventive and so thoughtful and, just so many things that I think about also come with that piece. So loving, snuggly, right? Whereas like other kids that are maybe neurotypical are like, I'm done with that part. Like, but my kids it seems to be that way with my neurodivergent kids, just generally of like, they would lay on their parent, like just, they want their body close to them. But thinking about how we empower the people around our kids to see neurodivergence as like a positive or like maybe it's even neutral, because I think sometimes it isn't a superpower. Like it can be if we're harnessing it right, but like having your kid throw a giant tantrum is not like something where you're like, yes, that was amazing, I loved that. So it's like, how can we see it as a positive and also not get so frustrated when our kids are not regulating, to not have them feel ashamed of themselves or like feel like their neurodivergence is something bad?
So I think the first thing, and I think a lot of parents don't do this, and I think it's, for me, I didn't think it was what worked for us. A lot of parents don't tell their kids that they have it, whether you want to call it
diagnosis. Yeah.
But I never, for us, I never felt that worked. She knew she was different. She
Mhm.
knew she thought differently. She knew she didn't do so great in school, and her sisters were getting straight A's. And especially if you're the second or third kid and you're coming after, I want to say
Mhm.
perfect sibling or a good student, and the teachers, and you're in the same school, and teachers go, "Oh, you're so and so sister. Oh, you're not like her." You have to have a kid who can say, "That's okay. I'm me." And
Mhm.
for my daughter, I can say her level of confidence of who she is just amazing. So yes, part of it is the snuggling. I love that. Her creativity is amazing.
Mhm.
Even when she hyper focuses, I love watching it because
Mhm.
I cannot do that. And when she is doing an art project and she hyper focuses on it, it's it's fascinating to me because it's not something I am capable of doing.
Mhm.
I am not creative. I am not, it's just not who I am. And, you know, so for us, we really made sure she understood her diagnosis. I mean, yes, she was diagnosed as a teenager, but still, I think
Mhm.
it was important. It was important. Actually, I shouldn't say that. She was diagnosed with a learning disability at 10. So at 10, we sat her down and explained that to her.
Mhm.
Because if you're looking at it, like I like to look at it as, it's just who she is. I don't look at it as a gift, a superpower. I don't look at it as
Mhm.
a deficit either. It's just who she is.
Mhm.
So learning might be a little hard for her, but she should understand that about herself.
Yeah.
Because if you don't understand that about yourself and you're studying and you're getting C's, or a teacher's kind of like putting you down, you need to be able to combat that with, you need to be able to say, I'm okay with who I am.
Mhm.
And, I always joke around. There's a story, like for her, there was a time she used to go to the resource room, and one day she had to stay in the regular English class. And a friend of mine was the teacher. And the teacher said to her, "Can you please write an essay?" And she said, "No, I have an IEP for a reason. I will not be writing you an essay." And the teacher stood up and she had to walk out of the room and crack up and walk back in and said, "All right, could you at least just sit down?
Mhm.
Just take a pen and color. I don't care." And it's because we raised her with the confidence of, I don't think the same way.
Mhm.
And that's okay. And I think that's such an important tool to have for your child to have in her toolbox. To be able to say, "You know what? I don't do X well, but I do Y well."
Mhm.
And for us, we've always just applauded the Y because you're an artist. Let's use that. So when there was a school project and it gave her the ability to have creativity, we harnessed that.
Mhm.
And when somebody needed help organizing something, she was always that first kid to do it. Her room's a pigsty, but you know what? My pantry, no problem.
Mhm.
And that's okay. And we really made her feel good about what she is good at. And
Mhm.
we work really hard on not making her feel bad about what she's not good at. And I will
Mhm.
say a lot, like her whole world changed when she left school because some of those expectations that you have in a school life disappear.
Yeah.
And she tried college and it didn't work, and that's okay.
Mhm.
And as a parent, I will say, one of the things is you have to be able to let go of expectations of what you thought for your child or what you thought
Yes.
her whole life was going to be. We map out our kids' lives, right? And that's, um, it's okay. She has a sister with a master's, another one going to college, and it didn't work for her. And
Yeah.
that's okay. And
Mhm.
that's okay. And we let her know that we love her for who she is and what she's doing.
Mhm.
As and I'm not gonna lie, at 16, I thought she would be laying in bed most days. She was 17 when COVID happened, and online school and her,
Yeah.
mm, mm-mm, you know, and now, she works. She works part time. That's what works for her. And so about harnessing, mornings are not her thing. She works from 12 to 7, 12 to 8, 12 to 9, depending on the day. She doesn't have to get up early.
Mhm.
We adapted.
Yeah. And it's hard sometimes because you imagine, like, sometimes we say, like, the world's not going to, like, adjust to you, but there are ways to
There are ways.
adapt, right? There are ways.
You know what? She found a job where she's able to work in the afternoons. And there are jobs where you can work in the afternoons if
Mhm.
you are not a morning person.
Yeah.
And, she still has to do her job. She still has to show up.
Yeah.
But it's okay that, And she found people who love her at her job. So if she shows up, one of her positions, she starts at 4. She does, and some days it's 4:15, and they're all like, "That's okay, sweetie. No worries."
Mm-hmm.
I think they're enabling her, but they're okay with it. So
yeah.
But I think also part of that is I also have to say to myself, I'm a very timely person, and she doesn't understand the concept of time. She still doesn't, and
Mm-hmm.
and we work with that, and we don't give up on it. Like we set alarms and we do things, but I've given her the tools now at this point to know how to do it herself.
Yeah.
If she can't get out of bed, she has a shaker bed now. It's something that we use in our residences for people with, that are deaf or blind that don't hear a fire alarm. She has a
Mm-hmm.
regular alarm that goes under her bed. It shakes her awake. So if no one's home with her, she can get up.
Yeah.
So you find the accommodation that works.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I think it's about making it work, and it may not be, I think, truthfully, even when I think about my own life, like I had like ideas of what my life would look like when I was like 15, right? My life is not anywhere close to what I thought it was going to be at 15, but so much better, right? Like it's not the same, but it's like great. Like I couldn't have imagined where I was going to get, but I think it's about that adapting the expectations of like being open to other ideas and options and thinking about what works for your kid and your family.
Exactly. You're not every kid fits in the same box. And it's so important. And this is one of the battles I used to have when she was in high school is she's not in a box. She's a circle kid, and that's okay too.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like we high school, some parts of high school were hard for me,
Yeah.
for her,
Mm-hmm.
and she can look back at herself and go, look what I've accomplished,
Mm-hmm.
and be proud of herself,
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. You talk very candidly about the emotional toll of parenting, and I'm curious about like what you've learned about giving yourself grace in this journey. We've kind of talked about, just like shifting our expectations and things like that, but like how have you learned to give yourself grace?
So I'm gonna tell you, it was not an easy journey to grace for me at
Mm-hmm.
all, at all. And I think, recently when I started writing the blog, it actually helped me because, I would, we all want to be perfect parents, but nobody's a perfect parent. Nobody's a
Yeah.
perfect anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a lot for me to be able to say, I'm doing the best I can. I don't need to listen to other people judge me,
Mm-hmm.
and to give myself that grace. And, I said earlier, you know, sometimes I'll look back and people will come to me and say, oh, should I do this for my child? Should I do that for my child? Should I do this? And I can very much say, had I maybe given her some ADHD meds earlier in her journey, maybe her life would be a little different. But I can also say, and I use that as advice to others and say,
Mm-hmm.
this is what I did, and this is what worked for me. And maybe at 12 it would have been a little different, but at 14 it worked, and it was
Mm-hmm.
okay, and she's great now, and that's fine. And to be able to say to myself, I can use my journey to share advice for others and give my feelings, and
Sure.
maybe it'll help another parent without beating myself up anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because I'm not in those day-to-days of, getting the phone calls from the school.
Mm-hmm.
I will also say that, like, there was a time where literally 2 to 3 phone calls a day about
Yes.
some of the dumbest things ever.
Mm-hmm.
I really once got a phone call because she dropped a pencil on the floor and it took her 35 seconds to pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought that was too long. And
Mm-hmm.
really, she should have moved faster. And I'm like, you are a school for kids with learning issues. Really? But because I also worked in a mental health organization,
Mm-hmm.
I had some support from my colleagues. And at that time, I happened to have been sharing an office with 2 of my colleagues. And one of them
Mm-hmm.
said, give me that phone. I can't listen to this anymore. And she was a couple of years older than me, so her kids were already out of the house, and she was like listening to these conversations of mine, and she was just so frustrated. But she was an amazing support, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it's important to get the support from your family, from your friends. Sometimes this person, I mean, I don't know, this woman who was an amazing help to me, she didn't even know my kid.
Yeah.
You know, we worked together, but did she see my child? But she saw what I was going through, and
Mm-hmm.
she supported me. And I think I learned a lot from the, watching people give me grace and watching colleagues of mine give each other grace, but knowing for yourself, you're not perfect. And I think part of it has to be the fact that now I have this amazing, amazing daughter who at 23 will still come up to me and snuggle with me in my bed. No one else in my house does that, but I know she loves me and I know I love her and we have an amazing relationship.
Yeah.
Even when there are times I'm like, sweet, one of the things we're working on now is managing your paycheck. And not spending it, because if you're, she's impulsive and she sees something and she just buys it, and we work on that. So I'm not saying the work's not done. The work's a little different.
Sure.
And knowing that she's like my bestie, and she'll tell you my mother's my best friend. So I can see now that even in the days of frustration and even when things, I thought, oh my God, I'm screwing this kid up in a way, like, oh my God, how am I going to make this kid okay? She's okay. So it gives me the ability to, hindsight's 2020, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
So it's important. You're doing a good job. Well, us parents, we're doing a good job. And we should know we're doing a good job. And our kids love us.
I love that.
And they don't expect perfection from us. Just like we shouldn't expect perfection from them.
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, I think because at least I can speak for myself. Like I was raised in a time where it was like there were expectations for behaviors and you just did or didn't do those things. And so like, it's not like ADHD is a new thing. It's just that, especially with girls, we were people pleasers or are people pleasers. And so then we would do whatever they said because we didn't want anybody to be upset with us, but it didn't mean it wasn't hard. It didn't mean we didn't struggle. Right. And so I think, giving our kids grace, giving ourselves grace, understanding that we're doing our best, learning new tools, right? Like doing everything we can to have the most harmonious house, because we're the only ones who have to live there, right? Like no one else has to live there. So if we feel like it's okay, then okay.
Yeah, then it's okay. And I think that's something I really learned along the way, is that people could give me all the advice in the world, but at the end of the day, I'm the parent. My husband's the parent, and it has to work for us. And we have to make it an environment that the other kids are okay with. Now, like there are times now I listen to my 20-year-old tell stories and she'll be like, Ma, you didn't know what she did to me. And you didn't know, like you would yell, like you would punish her and then she'd come into the room and hit me. And like, it will break my heart. It will break my heart. And we'll talk it out and I'll listen and I'll support her with, that, because, you don't know what it's like to be I don't know what it's like to be the little sister of somebody that isn't always in her best behavior and isn't always okay, and definitely had some anger management problems as a younger kid. But you know what? They're best friends. And I think it's so important. Like, so, even now, like we'll still be doing, healing conversations of, when you were 8 years old, you did this to me. And I'm not going to say it doesn't, like, it's not a knife in my heart, because it is sometimes listening to it, but knowing that they still feel safe enough to have those conversations with each other and then hug it out, even at this age. It like means the world as a parent to know your kids still love each other, even though there were bad moments when you, so
yeah, that makes sense. What do you want parents to take away from this conversation, or like, what do you wish you would have known earlier in your parenting journey?
So there are a couple things. Number one, I'm going to go back to, it's okay not to be okay. Those are the words of, Michael Phelps, but that has resonated with me. Not every day is going to be perfect, and that's okay. You are your child's best advocate, and no one knows your kid better than you. And when something like that, you said mom gut. Yeah. When your mom gut says something, use it, do it, follow it.
Yeah.
Listen to your mom gut. It is the best thing you could possibly, it's the and the professionals aren't always right. Like sometimes they are, but you're the mom, and that's important. And I think, the village is important. Having the support system from wherever you can get it, not let other people judge you. And if you've ever been a parent out and about when your kid's having a meltdown or your kid's screaming, it's not the best.
Yeah.
It's not the most pleasant. And there are people out there in the world who are going to judge you, but don't let them break you. Please. Like, just to give you a great story, my daughter, she was 2.5. I was very largely pregnant, and we were in the children's place, and she was climbing on something, and they threw us out of the store, and all she wanted was a pair of slippers. But they threw us out of the store, and we couldn't buy them. And we were in a mall that was a square, and this child was crying and rolling around on the floor in the square. And people were coming up to me going, you should stop her from doing that. I'm like, thanks, good advice. I really, really appreciate that. Or, why is your baby crying? You should do something. Do you want to be a better mother? Maybe you should discipline your child. And I had I had a 4 or 5-year-old with me who was just like, and I was very heavily pregnant, and I really didn't know what to do. And I remember crying and calling my husband, who was at work, and saying, you are always so jealous that I'm home with these kids on Sunday and you're at work, and just listen to what's happening right now. And finally, like I said, you know what? No, I'm not letting these other people, tell me what to do. I picked her up. I held her through that giant stomach, and I said, we're going to be okay. Let's go to the car. They don't let us in that store. We'll find you slippers somewhere else, And I calmed her down. And she wasn't very verbal at the time, so it was a little hard. But knowing that I didn't let those other people get to me, so important. So please, as a parent, don't. There are a lot of people that are going to give you advice, good and bad. You're a wonderful parent, and don't let anyone take that away from you. And I think, one of the things that you said, giving myself grace, don't live with regrets of like, I could have done this differently. I could have done it better. Use what you learned and grow as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the things like I like to tell myself, even to this day, and it's okay to ask for help when you need it.
Yes.
And take it out.
Absolutely. Yes.
So important. And when it's you can't handle it for this moment, take your self-care, take your moments, walk away, do what you need to do. And I cannot even tell you how many times I have said to my mother, hey, Ma, could you please, I'm begging you, take her out for a little walk today, because, somebody else needs something in this house, and I can't focus on her too.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for this conversation. It's been so helpful to hear how you have navigated the challenges of neurodiversity in your own house and come to the other side. You have an adult child.
Yes. And she's wonderful, and we love her with, all our might. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks again, Lisa, for sharing your journey with us of parenting a child with neurodiversity and giving us tips and tricks that worked for you, and also just reminding us to trust ourselves. With that, I'll say thank you so much for your time today. Please like and subscribe to our show. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And also, please keep the emails coming with future topic suggestions to accidentalexperts@gmail.com. Have a lovely day. Some words from our legal team.
The information presented in this podcast is not intended or implied to be a substitute for appropriate professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. All content, including text, graphics, images, and information contained on or available through this podcast, is for general information purposes only. This podcast makes no representations and assumes no responsibility for the accuracy or information on or available through this podcast, and such information is subject to change without notice. You are encouraged to confirm any information obtained through this program with other sources and review all information regarding any condition or treatment with the appropriate professionals.
What we're saying is, yes, I am a real therapist, but I'm not your therapist.